I know all the people in the call are very well informed, probably already, so I'm sorry if you already know everything about what's happening in ESEF, but a small recap still here. As we all know, there has been quite a lot of open topics around ESEF that were not part of the regulation. One of them has been the status of the ESEF reports. Should it be treated as the official financial statement or not? For instance, in Finland, the transparency directive has been translated in a way that it's stating that the ESEF, the annual financial statements need to be published in XHTML format, but not necessarily prepared. And at least in Finland, and I hear in other countries, this has caused a little bit of confusion as to what is the official financial statement and which is the document that should be audited and signed by the board and so on. So this has remained to be open. And then, of course, the different aspects of auditing that relate to the first point, but also the contents of the audit, if there is an auditing included in ESEF reports as to which part of it should be audited, the usage of tax and so on, and how the statement should be formalized if it is audited. And quite many countries have already drafted a local standard on what should be covered in the ESEF audit, but not all countries. And I think some countries like Sweden, for instance, have already changed their laws that ESEF should be always covered by the statutory audit. Then when we're talking about digital reports, digital signatures also come to play. I think there is very various readiness levels in different countries when it comes to digital signing, and a lot of open questions here as well. And this also relates to the first topic, to what is the status of the ESEF filings. Then we all hope, I think, that there would be some single access point where we could nicely get hold of ESEF data from various OAMs. But at the moment, there is at least no public knowledge about such single access point to be built in the near future, let's say. We are living the unusual year, and COVID affects everything. And so it turned out that it also affected ESEF, as there was a group of countries that started an initiative to seek postponement on the start of the ESEF filings, with the reasoning behind that, since governments are struggling and companies are struggling, that we could at least make their life a little bit easier by postponing this new regulation that is perhaps then not so strict if it happens this year or the next year. And there was a group of countries, I think France and Bulgaria were one of the frontline ones that started the initiative to seek for this postponement. And it was actually passing the decision process of the European Parliament just last week about this postponement option, and it would allow the countries basically to push it forward for 1 year in a way that companies would still have the option to start ESEF next year as well, if they are ready. And here we have the quote from the news. At least to my understanding, this is the only publication that there is still about the actual decision. but it has been made last week, and the one-year option for the delayment is decided. But what is interesting is that still the European Parliament feels like the member countries should sufficiently justify why they have decided to postpone, and that listed companies should still have the option to file in ESEF next year, even though if the country would seek for the postponement. So it actually doesn't help if the OAM is not ready, for instance. And personally, I think that there should be readiness in all companies regarding ESEF already, since it's already the end of year. And it was so unclear if the postponement is going to pass or not. So even if this option will be used, let's hope that many companies still decide to file in ESEF, and perhaps it's a good practice for all of us to see perhaps if there is some issues with the filing after all. But let's hope that still next spring we will see many filings in ESEF. And yes, this change actually requires a change also in the transparency directive, and it's very unclear still in which point of time this is going to be given, because until that the old directive applies. And here in the news release it says that it will apply 20 days after the publication of the official journal of the European Union. So the release date of this is also unclear. So I think there's quite many things still unclear, like if some company was to file their financial statement in January already, like would they be then complied to do it in ESEF? I'm not sure. I think, or so I've heard, that quite many countries are going to be using this postponement option. Finland at least has already said so. Then around a month ago, there was this communication from the European Commission around the open topics. And I think many of us were waiting for this document, as so many things were kind of waiting for what they're going to say. And it was nice that it finally came out and gave us more trust and more clear directions as to where the national legislation should be going. And for instance, they took a stance on where the audit applies, and quite clearly saying that ESEF should be part of the statutory audit, and there should be a formalized way of stating the auditor's opinion about ESEF. Then there was quite many points where not much were said, for instance, about the electronic signatures or filing the ESEF reports into the business registry. Both were kind of left to the consideration of the local legislation, how countries should proceed with these. But also one open question is that how should third country issuers act with ESEF, and it was clearly stated that it applies to them as well. Summa summarum, I think national legislation will be required in many countries, and it's a bit worrying perhaps to how different directions different countries may take. For instance, with auditing and yeah, applying the signatures is maybe a secondary thing, but it would be, of course, nice if a similar approach would be taken in all European countries, but it seems like there's quite a lot of things left to the consideration of the local governments. But yeah, I think that was all from my ESEF news, and I will hand it over to Javi. Thank you.